Welcome back. Apocalypse and the End Times. We are interesting discussions going on here. We're talking to Paul Maguire. Let's pick up now, because we've opened up on the first segment of this program a whole bunch of interesting things which we need to visit over the upcoming programs, and hopefully more on this program. We started by firstly talking about the UN, their primary focus, one world government. Let's pick up also with IMF, the International Monetary Fund, okay, and also the global crisis, financial crisis that many of our viewers are involved in to some degree, whether it be their 401ks or around the world their stocks and investments have diminished by maybe a third or a half. God forbid, I pray none, dear viewer. I pray the Lord has protected you and kept you through this awkward time. Do you think the current economic crisis, where do you think it's come from? Is it tied in with what we've been talking before?
And the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
Is this just a colossal economic crash, or is this a carefully maneuvered and strategized approach?
I think it's probably a combination of both. It's like somebody tripped over a switch by accident. I think there's some accidents involved here, but I think the accidents are being used to propel a previously existing agenda. I was reading Alan Greenspan today and saying how he was so apologetic and he had made mistakes. And I'm sure he did make mistakes because he believed in the free market. However, as you know, and this is a very disturbing thing to find out as an American, because you believe in the American way of life, you know, truth, justice, and the American way, the old Superman TV shows. The Federal Reserve, as you know, has nothing to do with the federal government or the U.S. government. There's nothing federal about it. I, a U.S. citizen, have no control over it. The Federal Reserve is a conglomerate of multinational, international banking concerns and financiers that have no loyalties to the United States whatsoever. Their loyalty is to global financial interests.
But how did the Federal Reserve come into being?
The Federal Reserve came into being through a series of conspiracies. It was fought as far back as our first founding fathers. Jefferson was very resistant to a bank, an international bank, or a central bank controlling the United States, because he knew that if a central bank controlled the United States, it would control the political structure. Andrew Jackson fought this fiercely because he knew if there was the establishment of a central bank, it would be the end of democracy. Later on, as you quoted, I believe, John F. Kennedy a while back, fought this central bank. Around 1913, 1914, a bunch of very wealthy industrialists met secretly on a place called Jekyll Island, a resort area, and they came up with the Federal Reserve System, which was to take the American money supply and make it independent of the American people and the American government, have it owned by international banks. They passed the Federal Reserve Act in the middle of the night, around 11 p.m., 12 midnight, when America wasn't paying attention, and when America woke up around 1913, 1914, the money supply, the banks, he who controls the money controls the country.
Correct.
America's money was no longer owned by the American people or the American government. It was now owned by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is international banking interests. So you saw the transfer of power and authority from the American people and the American government to an international group of financiers. And so today America is controlled not by the people. It's not controlled by we the people. That's an illusion. There's very little difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I do believe every Christian should vote and pray. There are some differences. We do need to vote. But essentially both parties are controlled by the same international banking interests.
Okay, and can I just say, and that is why then, hearing you there, is why Ronald Reagan said the Federal Reserve is accountable to no one.
Absolutely.
So no one monitors it, it's not accountable, it's not responsible to anyone, it's its own independent...
Yes, and it's in total madness. You read the financial papers in the headlines, and you keep talking about, not you, but the media keeps talking about the Fed, and how we're going to pay for this debt. Well, how are we going to pay for this debt? We're going to pay for the debt by printing money based on nothing.
Correct.
I wish I could do that when I'm in debt. I could go into my printer and just print money. printing the
lended
Fed,
to the government.
yes, the Fed is
The
going to
government taxes the American
Yes,
people.
right.
This is the Fed, a privately controlled or owned situation.
Yes.
Getting the American people to pay for the mess. Now, as you say, it's part accident, and it's out of that being used to work this thing through.
Which part was engineered, Paul?
I think the part that's engineered is the result. Look at the result in America and in all the European countries, Germany, Britain, France. What this has done, Karl Marx couldn't have dreamed for a better scenario. You essentially have the government owning industry, banking, and finance. Well, the name for that 2 years ago was called socialism. Karl Marx said that the government should own the means of production. That's the essential tenet of communism. In this particular case, though, it's not the government that is owning so much the banking industry, because the government is owned by the Federal Reserve. So we have the government owning major banking industries, major corporations, which is the antithesis of capitalism, but the government is owned by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is an international banking system. So what we are really seeing is a very fast movement towards a global government, a one world economic system, and a global currency. What are all the world leaders saying on almost a daily basis in front of the television cameras? We need a global currency. We need a global regulatory system. Well, what global regulatory system? What global currency?